We gather round dim candlelight to delve where sanest avoids sight, into twisted worlds that Lovecraft penned, where cosmic terrors apprehensions rend. These truths, not meant for mortal brain, but like those in Lovecraftian vein, drawn by fascination grim, to learn what none should e'er acquire. As films they try to emulate, the mythos they dare replicate, they court revelation of the dire kind and risk what's left of human mind. So wish them well on nightmare quest, that some humanity in them rest. Pray that benign powers hear our plea to guard what's left of sanity. Join us if you be so inclined, as we descend into darkest mind, with Ray, Tommy, and Pete, your guide, through fraying sanity, their plight.
Wow!
Yeah, some of that stuff just straight up doesn't rhyme.
But it was Lovecraft-tastic. I loved it.
Hi, Ray, Delancey, Tommy, Metz. Hello, gents. I'm Pete Wright.
Hi,
from the
hello,
podcast.
friend.
Why are you not recording more audiobooks?
Right?
I learned to roll my tongue through Duolingo. It's really, really useful. Look, so here's the thing. We're doing Lovecraft. I would like to start with a setting of the table. And I hope we don't end with any of us saying, I really regret watching all of these movies. I don't think we will. But let's set the table with what we knew about Lovecraft going into this series. And I'll start because it'll be brief. Nothing, really. Hadn't read any Lovecraft, didn't know the Lovecraft thing. I knew it involved tentacles. That's it. Ray, do you have anything up on me?
I mean, other than the fact that I too had not really read much Lovecraft, or any really.
Yeah.
And I had been going through some of the Lovecraft adaptations, film adaptations, but yeah, that's really that's it.
Okay, Tom, you are the big reader.
I read too much Lovecraft. I got really into him in college, and I read things like The Dunwich Horror, Color Out of Space, of course, The Call of Cthulhu, and I got really into the idea of over different stories, he started this entire mythos, the Cthulhu mythos, and it kept, growing and growing, and different parts of different short stories would inform other parts of other stories, because really the biggest thing of Lovecraft is you are barely peeking through a door. Yeah. And what you see immediately makes you insane. And so it's always it's the real horror versus terror change that I got really into. So I saw a lot of it.
Sure.
Had you been aware? I assume you had to have been aware that when you were watching horror movies, that you were actually seeing Lovecraft's influence when you started really getting into horror movies.
Not
Is that fair?
as much. I wouldn't have thought of The Thing or Prince of Darkness or In the Mouth of Madness to do Carpenter's Apocalypse trilogy as Lovecraft films. It never occurred to me, like, it had to be real obvious, like The Mist. Frank Darabont's The Mist. That's clearly, it's literally mist and tentacles. But a lot of these other ones I wouldn't have seen coming, because I guess I was more, I don't know, old gods, the outside coming in, reawakening something that was here long before us, is all over horror. And this was a neat wake-up call to just how influential he's been over so much in so many different films.
Well, and I think that's true, right? I mean, like even the oldest movies in this list are, they truck in either cosmic horror coming from space we don't know, or old gods coming from, that which lives in this other space, and we're going to reignite. And that's like all of these movies. That's all of the movies.
Yeah.
And I had no idea when we started that they were going to be able to be classified like this. Ray, would any of them surprise you?
I was surprised to see, like Tommy said, The Thing and Prince of Darkness, but also The Blob, because not to sound too much like Tommy and steal his answers, but I never really thought of those as as Lovecraftian. But as I'm watching them, I'm like, you know what? I can totally see where this was influenced.
Yeah. Well, and that's really the trick. And I think this, I feel like I have to say up front, the other thing I didn't know about Lovecraft, only maybe peripherally, is that Lovecraft was a problematic dude.
No.
And yeah.
Give him another shot. It was a different time. Racism was awesome. Yeah.
Well, and you bring that up. So let's just say he was an avid white supremacist and sexist, and you can see that play out in his written works. And I think one of the things that we can say as we truck over time is different filmmakers and different creators riffing on the concepts that Lovecraft brought about is actually improving. Like the concepts are not as dated as their rampant white supremacy and racism and sexism in the earliest films would indicate. He said of Hitler, "I know he's a clown, but God, I like the boy." That's that's
strong take, weirdo.
Peak. So, we just got finished doing a year on Joss Whedon's The Avengers and having real dainty trouble with the problems that Joss Whedon has in the industry. And H.P. Lovecraft is like, hold my beer, y'all. Like he really defines the case of separating the artist from the art. So I want to get that out front. What we're really talking about are the influences. I read some Lovecraft going into this and got the compendium of short stories, and I don't love the work anyway. Like it's hard for me to it's not my jam. I'm not recommending anybody go read it. You can if you want. Really, I think what is so surprising to me is what we've set up front here is that so much Lovecraft is everywhere. And in the list of movies that we talk about, we're talking about both direct adaptations of his work and adjacent adaptations to his work that have the symbols and tropes of Lovecraft. That's what we're going to get into. But first, if you don't mind, may I talk a little bit about Lovecraft the boy?
Oh, please
do.
H.P. Lovecraft was born in 1890 in Providence, Rhode Island. As a child, he grew up haunted by madness and death in his family. Yeah, I'm done with that voice. He had a rough. He had a rough
do my
upbringing.
Crypt Keeper.
He had
that never runs out of juice. He enjoyed catching frogs. Okay, go ahead.
His dad had a psychological breakdown related to syphilis that sent him to an asylum. Lovecraft went to hang with his mother's family. His grandmother died, sent him back to his just the trauma of dealing with, family dying all around him. Much of their, neurological disorders in his grandparents and his parents were related to syphilis, they say. I don't know. Syphilis was very popular back then. He lived with intense social anxiety.
It's going to be as big as Hitler.
He lived with intense social anxiety and agoraphobia, and as a result, he ended up really living in his own head and threw himself into horror and science fiction. Never graduated high school and fell in love with science anyway, and then became a rampant racist and xenophobic, which is weird. And when you read scholars talking about Lovecraft, it all comes down to this. There is no way that his xenophobia and racism, which had been in the 30s sort of scientifically debunked, align with his passion for science and science fiction. Like he was a very complicated person, and I found that really fascinating. His literary influence is equally fascinating because he was one of the early sort of public domain writers. He encouraged everyone to take his ideas, take the Cthulhu universe, the Miskatonic University stuff, the Arkham community, and write the hell out of it. Just take it and do what you want, write in universe, while he was still alive. And as such, there's an interesting economic trade-off. He died penniless, and yet we are still talking about Cthulhu and Arkham and all of these things that have been used so broadly. So I think that stuff is really fascinating about what he chose to do. In fact, one of the articles I was reading actually attributed his work to the popularity and the contributions to and the ongoing, enduring popularity of the zine, which is still a big deal today, right? Like the sort of zine culture. And he popularized, if not, sort of originated weird fiction, capital W weird fiction. So he's got the guy's got roots.
Yeah.
Which brings us to our movies. A recitation of the movies. And as always, we have the movies, the list, and a Letterboxd link. If you click on the link, you'll go straight to our playlist, and that will take you to see all of the movies. And if you're on Letterboxd, you can see how many of the movies have you actually watched and reviewed. There are kind of a lot of them, so bear with me. The Haunted Palace, the Dunwich Horror. These are in order of release. The Evil Dead, The Thing, Reanimator, Prince of Darkness, The Blob, Cast a Deadly Spell, In the Mouth of Madness, The Call of Cthulhu, The Color Out of Space, El Color que cae del cielo, Annihilation, The Lighthouse, Color Out of Space, this time with Nicolas Cage, and Underwater. So we have, 16 movies on the list.
A lot of movies.
There were a lot of movies over the last month.
Kind of makes you rethink the format. For the future. just wanted to put that out there.
I'm the one with all the movies. I asked people, I said, hey, I don't know much about Lovecraft. Give me some movies. And people responded, and I never actually took movies off the list as more came in. So there's a process question.
Yeah.
Give me a sense of your overall, I've been talking too much, so give me a sense of your overall view of the series as we watch them. What were the standout pieces? Tom, you want to go first?
Sure. For me, I love the film Annihilation, starring Natalie Portman.
Yes.
It's an incredible film. I saw it in the theater and I was like, and then I saw it later and then I own it and I think it might be an absolute masterpiece. And that is, if I had to pick a favorite from this list, it might be that, because it gets into the real interesting parts instead of just tentacles of what Lovecraft was talking about. That Lovecraft was talking about something coming from somewhere else and overtaking. I mean, and you can see his xenophobia in that, being overtaken by something other, remaking the world, as is used in Color of Space, at least in the Nicolas Cage version, the idea that it's poisoning everything, changing everything into something like the world it came from, into what it knows. We all know it's coming. They can't get away. So the idea of this unknowable, or to use the current, as you used, weird thing, it's taking something that is grounded, that makes sense, but then either in Annihilation refracting it, or taking it apart, separating it, fusing it together, using that in Annihilation, they use, it seems to be like evolution. It's evolution gone rampant. That it's just evolving, and everything's mixing together, no matter what kind of plant, animal, anything. It's just changing. And so that is, I think, a really smart, there's no tentacles in Annihilation, but the science and the weirdness of it is a real standout for me.
Yeah, I think that gets to one of the major themes that I kept seeing over and over again in these movies, which is that when the outside comes in and starts doing the thing like rewiring DNA, as in Annihilation, or consuming, as in The Blob, or whatever it is,
mimicking, like in The Thing,
right? Mimicking, like in The Thing. All of it goes to this one punchline, which is humanity is insignificant in the face of foreign invasion. Humanity is insignificant, whether it be by elder gods coming back to take over, or cosmic horror aliens that aren't the humanoid aliens we see on Star Wars, Star Trek, whatever. These are the things that are embodied in color and molecules, and we are insignificant.
Right. We can't understand them, and we certainly can't measure up to them. And they, just to finish, I'm sorry to jump back in real quick, but they don't care about us at all. There's no morals. There's no judgments. Like in The Thing, in The Blob, especially The Blob, the Frank Darabont co-written one, everybody is killed. Nice guys, bad boys, unhoused people, a child. It doesn't care. We are the ants seen from a giant, which is actually which is extra scary. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to overstep, Ray.
No, I love it. Actually, one of the things that I find most fascinating about Lovecraft and all the themes in these films and his stories is the impending, inevitable doom of it all. And there's just so much fear there that it's no wonder this guy was such a racist, sexist. I mean, because those are all attitudes that are based in fear. And he's not like one of these other science fiction writers who had hope when he looked to the stars, apparently. And you see that in every single one of these movies. There's not a single one of them that has a happy ending, I don't think. Well, except maybe The Haunted Palace.
I guess maybe. But that's a really interesting point, especially going to the Haunted Palace. And I would throw over to Reanimator, which is another one of the adaptations of his stories, which deals with the hopelessness, but also the very fine line between genius and madness, right? Like that movie is, first of all, there are some deeply sexist sequences, particularly when they strip the young ingenue on the table and the headless, reanimated corpse of an older doctor begins licking her naked body. The head is being held by its decapitated body. It was bad news. That movie was crazy, but it really celebrates that. And I think what's really interesting is that once, like, the serum, the reanimation serum becomes that sort of unearthly unknown, the thing we fear. We have turned ourselves into the thing from beyond, and we don't know how to handle it. Those things are interesting. I want to, as we're talking about the things from beyond, I want to pivot to the Necronomicon because, Tom, one of the episodes we already did in this show was on the Book of the Vampire. And this whole series deals with essentially books of vampires in the form of the Necronomicon. These are the instruction set for describing, the universe of the occult in these movies. And we have them in a lot of these movies have these. Evil Dead, all the Cthulhu, Cast a Deadly Spell, Book of In the Mouth of Madness. Like the whole book is essentially a Necronomicon. How do you put those concepts together?
I like it being, again, a connector for all of them. I talked about how turned on I got about the idea of this mythos before I knew the word mythos being grown, and for it all having an instruction manual of describing what the old gods were, who the goat of 1,000 young is, who this person is, and then instructions on how to bring them back. There's an interesting push-pull that people use for either the Necronomicon, whether it is mentioned or not. There seems to be two big options for using the Necronomicon and why you want to. One, a lot of them, like, say, it wasn't on our list, but Cabin in the Woods, to bring up Joss Whedon, we are using those rules that would be found in the Necronomicon. It's not listed there, but to placate the old gods, to keep them, to keep Yarg-Saguth dreaming in his dreaming space, because if he comes back, it'll be chaos and misery. Whereas in Cast a Deadly Spell, they want to bring old gods back, yes, to wreck house, but also because they will be put in power. And that's what you get a lot of the people that use the Necronomicon, these different, and it's always foreign hordes that are wanting to bring it back, except for Cast a Deadly Spell, but they want a certain amount of power. They want to bring back the old gods in order to clean the slate. And then usually they will be elevated. They'll be on the right hand by using the Infernal Bible. Did that answer any part of your question?
Well, I mean, I think it did. I'm not sure if I had a good question.
I used the word Necronomicon a lot. Is that
you
good?
did several times? I think that lines up. That's a real SAT answer. I think that the thing that interests me the most is like using the Necronomicon and by extension the Book of the Vampire as a narrative tool to move us through the horror, to explain and define the rule set of the horror to come. And like you look at the Dunwich Horror, and it was so weird, like the way he propped the book up between her legs as like a reading easel. That was unpleasant. This thing to describe how the universe fits together, and that there is like is this sort of tied together through this book. Do you see this as the same book in the Lovecraftian sort of literary and cinematic universe? They all kind of look the same.
Mm-hmm. Evil Dead.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. And if you think about it overall, Lovecraft's biggest device, other than just seeing something and going crazy, is it's always through storytelling. It's almost never a first person. It's someone stumbling over their uncle's accounts or their uncle's uncle's accounts. I think he did that because, A, that let him play a lot with unreliable narrators. But then B, also it makes it seem more real. It makes it seem more believable to not just have one person see it, but I have this account. This written down account of it. It makes it seem like it's passed through history. It can't, I'm experiencing, but so did this person. It's like how you only believe urban legends if a friend of a friend of a friend. There has to be like a series of people. And so that's in that way, Lovecraft is filled with books of the vampires. It's tons of diary entries, ship's logs, trying to bolster the reality of what seems completely unreal.
Did anybody count? I mean, I don't know. So I watched The Call of Cthulhu, and The Call of Cthulhu is an interesting one because I think it was actually made and funded by, I don't know. Do you know the backstory on that one, Ray? Like the Lovecraftian Heritage Society, I think?
I really don't know that much about the background of it. I just know that it was filmed, on a low budget and done in the black and white silent film era style due to budget, but also because in a way that is probably the best looking era in which to capture one of these stories, because I don't know if you guys noticed this, but a lot of the fantastical stuff really asks a lot of filmmakers.
Yeah. And even when they're way under equipped to be able to deliver those, it seems weird that Lovecraft has captured so many imaginations, and especially on film, because it's by definition unseeable. You can't really take in the beast. And so when you really do, like at the end of Cast a Deadly Spell, it's pretty underwhelming because you've opened the door the entire way.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And real quick, just because you brought up the HPLHS, the HP Lovecraft Historical Society. Do you know where that's based out of?
Tell me. Your bedroom.
Burbank. I've been to it.
So close.
Yeah.
Have you really?
It's a museum
nice.
That's just filled with everything Lovecraftian. And then they've created, like, for the fake Lovecraftian university, they have old-timey trapper keepers, but instead of like the two people playing basketball, it's someone like fighting a tentacled monster. It's played very, very seriously. And it's about 20 minutes from my place. Sorry, go ahead.
That's fantastic. Right.
I was just going to say, to your point there, one of the things that I kept thinking through every single iteration of The Color Out of Space is that it's described as something that's beyond the normal color spectrum that we can perceive. And yet here we are looking at purple.
Yeah, it's clearly magenta.
Always
or
purple.
Pink. Yeah, they're like this color is not really a color, and I'm like, it clearly is. I think I turned on the subtitle.
It's literally a word.
Purple. Yeah.
And that's fine and everything, like it didn't really make the movie worse or anything for me, but it's just something that I couldn't not think about. This is something that I'm not really supposed to be able to perceive, on a human level. This is the stuff that drives people nuts when they see it.
Well, and that gets to one of the other bits of, I think, complexity of Lovecraft, the writer, and the interpretation of his work in film, that as much as he loved science and appreciates all of the mad scientist stuff that goes into it, like the contrast is there's always a failure of science and rationality to explain aliens. Right? Like that's where humanity falls short. And I guess that leads back to the insignificance of humanity too, those tropes that we see over time. I think when Ray's point is well taken on the black and white, using the black and white to capture this thing. And the Call of Cthulhu is sort of on one end of the spectrum, where when you finally see the beast and it has the tentacles, and it's shot essentially stop motion, right? It's essentially animated, and it's lovely and fun and kitschy. It does take some of the weight off of the movie, which was, we should say, short and essentially a Russian nesting doll of flashbacks. Like, it's just all flashbacks, the movie, to lead to the monster. But then we get to something like The Lighthouse, which is not explicitly Lovecraft, but in the end, the madness overtakes Arpats, and we see him in this fist fight with a mermaid, and with his lighthouse buddy, and with a tentacled beast. And the tentacles, so this is a movie that's shot, I guess it's shot in 4:3. I mean, it's just like, it's also what happens if Eggers makes a Wes Anderson movie. Like, there are some really striking visuals that look so like charactered, right? But then we have tentacles that are perfect CG in this otherwise, which puts me so deeply in the movie, because everything is believable, right? They don't open the door all the way, and it leads to this test of sanity in a way that I think is, even as it's not explicitly Lovecraft, the tone of Lovecraft that permeates that movie is so deep and so believable. It's one of the best of the lot that we watched this week for me. I love that movie. Am I alone? Tell me I'm not alone, please.
The Lighthouse? Yeah, I love it too.
Tom, why are you shaking your head?
I thought it's just rough. It's just like,
Tommy just doesn't like mermaid genitals.
I love mermaid. I don't like watching movies that I feel like I can smell. Like, it's just so unpleasant, and it's so gross the whole time that I was just like, I don't even need tentacles. I'm already itching. I thought it was a little impenetrable, incredibly acted.
Yes.
And I like the bringing over of the seagull, because that's such a traditional superstition. I like the inclusion of that. You can't ever kill a seagull. And fun thing in all of these movies is they keep splicing in different words. Lovecraftian words. Dunwich is found forever. Like, for instance, Lavinia is the name of the daughter in Color of Space, and the name of Wilbur's mother in Dunwich Horror. Like, there's always these, it's almost like an Easter egg. And In the Mouth of Madness is crazy with it.
My goodness.
It's like they just shook all of the words out. I just think that's fun, because that also feels like the mythos growing. And I didn't catch a lot of that in The Lighthouse, where it was pretty much everywhere else.
Yeah, that's right.
The thing about The Lighthouse, though, is the insanity. And that's the thing that I think draws me the most to Lovecraftian stories, because insanity or madness is probably the thing that I'm most scared of. And to watch Robert Pattinson in The Lighthouse just continue to stay at this lighthouse with Willem Dafoe, who you don't know how reliable this guy is. It seems like he's not doing any of the work. And then he's like pretty much gaslighting this guy, telling him that he's not doing anything. And it just keeps snowballing. And then it just is palpable.
Yeah.
Maybe I just responded to the unpleasantness. I made it a physical unpleasantness, but it is and it's an incredibly,
I totally get it.
From the framing or the aspect ratio alone, it is one of the most claustrophobic films I've ever been a part of. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, I absolutely agree with that.
I'm not saying that anybody has to love this movie. I totally get not liking it. I think that.
When are you guys both getting married to the movie? I'm so excited for your new relationship.
No, honestly, I think the fact that you either love it or you hate it is a testament to the movie, because I don't know of anybody who's lukewarm about it.
It had a few laughs. Everything involving the scrimshaw. Hooray. Yeah.
Well, and what's interesting about that one is that you don't really get a sense of ships, right? The lighthouse, you go into the lighthouse and you sort of expect the third act to be a race against time to save a ship in rocking seas. And you don't ever really get that, because these guys by then are just completely nuts. And, it leans in on another one of the themes that I keep seeing written about with Lovecraft, which is that the universe is amoral. The universe, again, the humanity is nothing. Humanity is insignificant. The universe is amoral and does not care about your state of mind. This is just a slideshow of your insanity. You're just going to watch it. It's going to be fine. Nobody else cares. And putting these guys in this isolated lighthouse and making them go to town on each other through their own the psychosis related to isolation, like significant isolation, is a Lovecraftian sort of thing in my now new burgeoning experience.
Stephen King, when he has written Lovecraftian things, he did it in a short story called Crouch End, and then his book, his novel Revival, gets very Lovecraftian, especially at the end, and he ups the ante. He says that the old gods have been trapped. They haven't been sleeping. They've been trapped so long, they have gone insane. And so it's not just immorality. He's saying that they don't know. It's like that story, I have no mouth, but I must scream. The idea of God going insane and wreaking havoc just because it doesn't know any better, that's equally as terrifying to let over into our... So it's not like, I want to come back and rule the earth. It's, I want to, wear oatmeal on my face. What? That's insane. I don't know why I thought that would be the epitome of insane. I might still be waking up.
Oh dear. The Lovecraftian breakfast universe. Yeah. Nice. All right. So of the films, you want to do just a quick run through the films in order on just like what you thought of them and how well you think they hit the Lovecraftian vibe. I'm interested in your greatest hits of them. So first, Haunted Palace.
This is one that I personally love just because I'm a huge Vincent Price fan. And what's hilarious is this is always advertised as a Poe movie.
Right.
Yeah.
And you see that at the beginning, Edgar Allan Poe's The Haunted Palace or whatever, but it's
weird.
Really just, it's based on Lovecraft, but they kind of use that quote at the end from Poe to tie it together. I don't know why they didn't just credit it to Lovecraft, but anyway, I love this movie. I love the creepy atmosphere. I love as cheesy as it is, the monster at the end. Looking in that pit, it looks like, to quote somebody that I saw in a documentary, it looks like somebody in a crappy Creature from the Black Lagoon mask in front of a haze.
Yeah, I don't know. I liked it. I liked it because I like the audaciousness of the sets, and I of the time. I mean, 1963. Also, love Vincent Price. The whole idea of these, like, not only are they talking about awakening old gods and all that stuff, but they've also they are taking on their elder spirits across a generation. Right. I thought that was, of all of these movies, that was one of the most interesting things, that young Vincent Price in most of the movie is actually awakening the spirit of his now burned on the tree in the first 10 minutes, Vincent Price, across generations. I thought that was a really interesting thing. And this is the town, the village of Arkham, the first time in our series that I heard the village name Arkham. I enjoyed this movie. It was a good introduction to some of the tones of Lovecraft. What'd you think, Tom?
Yeah, this was, I don't know, sometimes old movies, like, I'm enjoying it, and then, like, I'll be like, oh no, like like they don't have the ability to make that real, or that looks terrible, or something, or we don't talk like that. But I liked the adding of the Frankenstein-ish townspeople being upset for what's going on up on the hill. That can be found in Lovecraft later. Usually it's one person going crazy, and then the town or all the other people on the boat all trying to go stop that person from doing whatever he or she is doing. And I like the pit. I like, one of the cool things about Lovecraft, we've been talking about just opening the door, but it's always doors, mirrors, fog, darkness, pits, haze. You just said books. It's always this veil separating this dimension, this world from the next. And that's always been something that is really, like, how thin the veil can be if you have the right tools or the right object is always really scary. So I like it. I thought it was.
It's really interesting. It's an interesting point. Like when you talk about the veil, like one of the things that I think is so interesting about Lovecraft is that the way he portrays these characters, they are helpless from their urge to open the book, to pierce the veil. And yet all they have to do is not open the book. Like,
but how
I know
hard
it
is
makes
that?
a bad movie, but it's like,
Right.
yeah, it's the every movie is a marshmallow test for like opening
Right.
the book.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Dunwich Horror or Sandra Dee Almost Sacrificed.
You got to have that virgin sacrifice, you know?
Dean Stockwell is not captivating. And the movie really thinks he's mysterious and sexy, and instead he's bearded and weird and mustachioed. Not bearded,
mustachioed. Yeah.
Yeah. This one was a big, oh no, movie for me a lot of the time. It's just the acting for me was too stilted. It's too low budget. It's very Corman in that way, but with beautiful interiors. And then I kind of like that it goes really virgin sacrifice, put her on the altar and have the wind. I mean, it doesn't try to make anything an allegory. And then having a chant off between who I never occurred to me that Ed Begley Jr. had a father. But Ed Begley screaming reverse chants, and they have a chant off, and then the stop motion thing like waves.
A lot of hand wavy stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
I thought it was very cute. Again,
it's so weird to see Ed Begley as a good guy after seeing him in 12 Angry Men.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
But I thought the Dunwich Horror, I totally agree with you with Quantum Leap guy.
Stockwell.
Escapes me at the moment.
Dean Stockwell.
Thank you, Dean Stockwell. But I will say the thing I really love about the Dunwich Horror is it feels a lot like a Hammer movie. Like it has the same kind of pace. It has the same like slow accumulation toward doom that it has until you have this big silly finale.
And Sandra Dee can't stop drinking that drug tea. Boy, oh boy.
I know. She's just really thirsty. So thirsty. That was the other thing I wanted to make. I can't believe we forgot to say it out loud, but Lon Chaney Jr. in The Haunted Palace was really fun to see.
Oh,
since we spent some time talking about Chaney. It was really fun to see him looking really not great. Like they made him up just right.
Yeah.
That black and white, they sure can make the skin look green. Ugh, didn't care for it.
Yeah.
Evil Dead 1981 was terrible. I did not enjoy this movie, and I was told after by Ray, don't watch that one. Should have watched Evil Dead 2, which was essentially Evil Dead 1, but better. That holds up.
I think it's the one that everyone thinks they watched Evil Dead, and they watched Evil Dead too.
Yeah.
Parts of Evil Dead is almost unwatchable, not because it's so gross, but because it's so like poorly lit.
Yeah, that's
like
true.
the tree assault scene, the tree branch scene. I remember seeing that the first time and being like, "Oh no, it's that." Because I couldn't like the TV wasn't very good, and I was like, something very upsetting is happening, and I can't tell.
There's a lot of screaming.
All.
Right.
Yeah.
Evil Dead was one that was really important to me as a teenager. I just thought it was the coolest thing ever. However, one thing that I was never quite able to click with was all the claymation effects at the end.
It takes you back to a California Raisins-esque kind of a finale. I didn't care for it. There's just a lot of that in the last third of the movie. I didn't care for it.
But like Tommy was saying, you get the Necronomicon, but you get it through the unreliable narrator, in this case, Professor Noby, who left the recording of his reading the book.
So much exposition dump on reel-to-reel tape. Like, enough. Enough. I am sort of stunned by the number of my friends who have this at like 4.5, 5 stars on Letterboxd. I kind of can't believe. It makes me think that they just brought out their childhood diaries and said, "Oh, I rated this 5 stars when I was 12," and just
maybe
put it
that's
in Letterboxd.
Back when Letterboxd was out of 20.
Yeah. The next on the list, we have The Thing. Now, we've done The Thing on the next reel in the past. It's the first. Now, what did they call this of Carpenter's?
The Apocalypse Trilogy.
The Apocalypse Trilogy, and it gets more Lovecraftian as you go through the 3 movies, right?
Yeah.
We have this, we have Prince of Darkness, and then we have finally In the Mouth of Madness, which is just a pay-in to Lovecraft. The Thing, did you find Lovecraft in The Thing?
I wouldn't, as I said before, I would have called it just an alien movie. like a sci-fi alien movie, but it is different. It is changing us from within. It's pretending to be us, and it's starting in the face of insanity. It's causing incredible paranoia.
Yeah.
And that's instead of just going gibbering mad and, putting oatmeal on your face like you do. You can't, there's no one you can trust. In that room when they're testing the blood is so good. Kevin Williamson completely ripped it off for his movie, The Faculty. If you remember that movie, it's the exact same scene with some of the exact same dialogue, because he was like, it's just the best. Yeah. So
it really is.
I think that was
there's some tendrils in there.
There's some tendrils. I think it's really interesting watching it through that Lovecraftian lens to see this movie is Color Out of Space. This movie is Annihilation. This movie is like, it's all of these things, like that sort of uncertainty, that humanity is nothingness is it permeates the thing. And I never in a million years would have been able to tell you that this is at all Lovecraftian. I thought it was fascinating. Since we're doing this in order, we got to skip over some and do the Reanimator, which is the one I watched most recently, just this morning, in fact, as we record this. And my goodness, that Jeffrey Combs, I preferred him in all Star Trek stuff. Was this a valued rewatch? This was another one that's like straight across the bow Lovecraft.
Reanimator is one of my very favorite horror movies, just because it's so damn bonkers. It's just so crazy. And Jeffrey Combs is one of my all-time favorite actors, so I'm really biased.
I needed to go through a real paradigm shift when I was watching it. I was trying to make it into other movies or normal movies. And I realized, kind of like with Dunwich Horror, I need to like shake that off and just be like, this is doing its own thing, and just go along for the ride. And then therefore it was much more enjoyable.
Well, and that's the funny thing, like making sort of science, the occult, the mysticism, like we're reanimating through a thing we can't explain, we won't explain. It's green, so it does its job. And making humans the thing that is uncertain, like we can't trust ourselves with power. And this, we will be our own undoing, which I think is yet another trope that continues to kind of play out. It was in The Thing too, right? When paranoia takes over, we can't see clear enough to take care of ourselves. We end up undoing ourselves. So Reanimator, it was a fun watch. 1985, Stuart Gordon. And Stuart Gordon, as a director, has trucked in some other Lovecraftian stuff that I like.
From Beyond is a great one.
Right, From Beyond and Dagon. How do you say it? I don't know that one. Anyway,
sure.
So there are some other things in Gordon's catalog that would be worth checking out if you love his stuff here. Prince of Darkness, in which green slime is Satan embodied, and don't get any on ya, right? Wipe that off. That one. So now here we are with number 2 in Carpenter's Apocalypse trilogy, and we're leaning further into Lovecraft. This one a fun rewatch?
No.
Hard pass from Ray?
Honestly, this is one of those movies. Like, okay, I don't dislike it, but it's a movie that I want to like, but I just don't know what to make of it. To be honest with you, I can't tell what's going on at any time. It seems like John Carpenter has these great ideas, but it's just kind of lost on me, and I just can't comprehend, what he's trying to get across here.
I'm not able to separate it from when I first watched it, and I loved it. And of course, it involves potentially hell. It doesn't explicitly, it does say Satan later. It maybe should be formed as the anti-god, but the idea of getting a glimpse of what the other side can be, it's through a mirror, seems to be underwater, seems to be very dark. I like all of the bugs and unhoused people outside. I don't care about. There's a lot of dodgy things in this, but the idea of there being a portal, anything being a portal, if it's just reflective and that close to hell and being able to bring it across, it's tough. Like, and the last shot is one of my favorite last shots in all movies, of cutting right as you're about to potentially reach through the portal or just touch glass. It's tough to tell, because I just love this movie. I love the score, everything, and there's a very good chance this is my Evil Dead. Like, it's much worse than I remember, but I can't separate it.
Yeah, I don't know.
Love seeing Alice Cooper.
Yeah,
Yep.
right.
The slowest stabbing scene in the world.
This is another one. I don't think you're alone, Tom. I mean, when I look at my Letterboxd friends, a lot of 4 and 5 star reviews for this movie. So either they all saw it and are rating it off their first diary review,
right.
or Satan is real and they got the green goo. They drank the green goo.
We all got the goo, buddy.
Speaking of goo, look, it's the Blob.
Oof.
Ooh.
This one was a really big one for me because it still remains so violent.
Yeah.
And gory. For back then, I was shocked that it was sort of allowed. I think I saw it like on HBO or something, and I recorded it. And again, as I said, like everyone dies. Good guys, bad guys, a child, and it's bad death. That's the other thing that Lovecraft, you go insane, and if you die, it's usually not quick.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes some of the guys, like in the Call of Cthulu, they just sort of fall off weird styrofoam sets and die. But everyone else, like, you're being drawn into the unknown. And the Blob is especially, no one just dies. It's rough stuff. Yeah. You are incorporated and slowly seems like dissolved. I think they even say the original in-house guy, that he has some sort of acid on his hand. That seems like the most likely thing.
Yeah, what it feels like.
Yeah. So no, this movie is rough stuff for me.
You know, I love old horror movies, but I do not care for the original Blob movie. And this one, though, I adore. You know, like you said, all of the kills in this movie are so good. Like my favorite one has to be the first football player in the hospital that gets just completely engulfed, and like you see his face through the ooze, and then it just disintegrates him. Just such a great horror movie. And I especially love the fact that they changed it from an alien entity to a man-made entity that was in space that failed and came to Earth.
Right.
And it's just the government.
Yeah. Again, humanity is its own undoing. Failure of science to explain the irrational. Like, this is absolutely Lovecraft trope. I have a great time with this movie. It is really violent and gruesome. But arguably the most gruesome kill is in the next movie, Cast a Deadly Spell, 1991, which is death by paper cut.
Oh, right. That's right. He gets his all of his fake money swirls around him.
Around him and paper cuts him to death in a paper cut tornado. Like, it's fine. Like, it's fine when it's going on, but when his body hits the floor face down and you see he's just cheese grated, like, it was a fantastic makeup effect in a movie that has some crazy choices. Like, just crazy choices. There, I sent you guys a clip of fed up gargoyle with hands on hips. Like, that is my favorite thing. This movie was bonkers. I had never seen it, and I asked you, how did I miss it?
Yeah, I'd never heard of it, and the tone is so weird.
Yeah,
it's like they made a really gory horror movie and then gave it to the director of Gremlins 2.
Yeah.
And said, can you just finish all the scenes we forgot to shoot? Yeah.
It absolutely has that vibe around every corner. Yeah. Every corner. Oh, there's something wrong with your engine? There are actual gremlins in the reveal. Like, that is amazing. Amazing, this movie. Fred Ward.
Police chief is interrogating a werewolf. Yes.
Oh, don't sit in that chair. You'll get hair all over you. I mean, those lines, this movie, I don't know if it's good. Legitimately, I had so much fun watching this movie. It was a complete surprise, and it might be my Evil Dead. That's it.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
It might be terrible, but it's extraordinarily fun.
Oh, it is.
I can't imagine how the movie got made. Mm-hmm. I legitimately can't imagine who it would have been who had to say yes to funding it. Like, this just feels like such a weird, goofy auteur thing,
right?
Because it shouldn't exist, and it does, and I'm grateful for it. I had a blast. Julianne Moore is not the best lip syncing artist. That was tough. I was watching with my son, and he kept saying, "Tongues don't work that way." Does she know that? Anyway, that leads us to the third in our Apocalypse trilogy, In the Mouth of Madness, 1994. This one is Lovecraft, baby.
Love it. I love how meta it is, and it takes In the Mountains of Madness, the idea of In the Mountains of Madness, and instead warps it. It's clearly about like Stephen King, but what if Stephen King had the ability to drive everyone insane?
Yeah.
And I love the idea. I desperately want there to be like a Stephen King town, like a little, like, you know, you go to visit those old villages. They're like, this is how we used to make butter. But instead it's like, it's actual.
It's dairy.
It's dairy. Yeah. Where you go around and get to meet all of his characters and stuff. That's fantastic.
Yeah. And they don't know that they're in a book. Like that was a fun part about this movie. Like you're talking about how meta it is. I really enjoy that piece of it. And Sam Neill actually nails the like, it's a tough, I think it's a tough line to walk where you can be sincere and, you know, also deeply confused at how meta it is. And I think he just nails it. I love this movie. I think it's great.
Absolutely. Like the Lighthouse. That's the one thing that I love about this movie is it makes you feel like you're going insane too.
For sure.
That's cool. This also has the first that I remember of a double jump scare using the same, that he wakes up from the scare and then he rolls over and the cop is there again and he wakes up again. That's the first time I remember ever seeing a double wake up. Usually it's a cat and then you wake up or something, but that's funny.
Yeah. And that was really effective because, you know, again, we've never seen it before. I also like how it's sort of a Mobius strip of a movie, that it opens when he's in a straitjacket and thrown into the asylum cell. And it just starts from there and then leads us to his asylum cell.
Right.
I thought that was just a really neat narrative choice.
And that's so Lovecraftian. He's telling a story. It already happened and he's now taking you through what he learned. Yeah.
Yeah. And who, like, his journey to insanity is so perfect because, like, he starts really early cutting covers of books up to reveal the Lovecraftian villages, right?
Yeah.
The map, which was really great. So In the Mouth of Madness, big win. Okay. I want to talk about The Colors Out of Space as one.
Colors? Like attorneys general?
Yeah. Yes. There were 3 on the list of Color Out of Space movies. The first one was directed by Huan Vu from 2010. The next one was The Color Out of Space, the Argentinian approach to the material. And then the final one was 2019, directed by Richard Stanley, starring Nicolas Cage in an incredibly subtle performance. And all of these 3 movies are talking about the invasion of this extraterrestrial something that takes the form of the unseeable color and is full of the binary impacts of uncertainty on the world around them, right? It makes beautiful foliage and incredibly large fruits. And in the 2010 version, it's pears the size of your head. In Nicolas Cage's version, it's tomatoes of the same scale, but when you take a bite, they're unedible, right? They're inedible. They're terrible. Right. All of that is because of this meteorite that lands on the farm and over the course of days disappears, but it infuses itself and starts rewiring life. And I think that I took the Argentinian one ultimately off the list just because it was kind of hard to find, but I found it on YouTube and it's kind of a documentary retelling of the story. And so it's a really interesting film. It's a meditation more than a narrative story because it's telling it as if it was a real thing, as if the Color Out of Space story was real from the point of a narrator telling you, you know, and going through like visions. So it's fine. The original, the first one, the 2010 Huan Vu story, is a telling by way of, you know, an external character comes in to explore looking for a friend kind of a thing. And I liked this one. I liked the idea that it was told in like the German woods. I thought that was an interesting take. The Nicolas Cage version was, I thought, the best of breed. I think modernizing it did a lot for this story to actually bring it up with the time. And I think I thought it was just lovely. What'd you guys think about these movies? Knowing that you probably didn't watch the Argentinian one, I don't think.
One of the things that occurred to me, and I'll just make this real quick so Ray can talk smarter, is the ending of the Nicolas Cage movie, Annihilation, and then to a certain extent, The Lighthouse, all ends with in a way, the destruction of the person that gets the closest to whatever the creature is. In Annihilation, it's Jennifer Jason Leigh who turns into sparks. In Color Out of Space 2020, it's Lavinia, the daughter, who starts saying, I don't, oh no, I just have his things. I don't have what she said. She turns into sparks. And the Lighthouse, when he finally does give himself to the light, the thing that Willem Dafoe had said don't do, the entire film becomes distorted. And he flies down the stairs and he's not doing great. So I like that. That's a neat way of showing the complete unexplainable. Like, it's so powerful and so unexplainable that you, by definition, must be destroyed.
Yes.
By it. Or incorporated, whatever you want to see those sparks as being. But you are completely encapsulated by the unknown, which I thought is really cool. A neat connection.
Yeah. The German one, I thought, was a really interesting way of making the movie. You know, like I mentioned before, about the color spectrum, I thought it was an interesting choice to make the movie in black and white, and then only the color from space is in color. So I thought that was a really interesting choice. But the movie, I thought, was just a little over long in a lot of places. Definitely the 2019 or 20 version with Nicolas Cage was the way to go. Matter of fact, that one, I rank all these on Flickchart right after I watch them. That one shot way up my list.
Yeah, I could see that. I was actually watching it thinking, I think Ray's going to love this movie. I think this is going to be right up his alley. It is. It was that for me. I think I'm still challenged by the fact that the black and white movie, which again so perfectly encapsulates the world that they're trying to create, then they show us the color that you're not supposed to see, but they really highlight that you can see it because it's purple. I don't know. The choices about color, it's a hard movie and a hard story to take once you start thinking too hard about it. So, it is what it is. But Annihilation is also this movie, modernized, right? Annihilation is this movie. This thing comes down from nowhere, from this place we don't know. Meteorite hits the lighthouse. Oh my God, it's another lighthouse. Meteorite hits the lighthouse, begins expanding its influence and rewiring everything under its mysterious colored dome. A color that you can't quite see, right? It's this.
The shimmer.
It's the shimmer. This is the thing that I think the Color Out of Space adaptations couldn't quite get because of money, effects, whatever. In this movie, they got it. Like they were able to give us an environment that is so uncertain, you can't quite see it, but you know it's there. And everything that's in this environment is a failure of humanity to understand. And it doesn't go well for anybody.
This was the first time that I ever read a book and then immediately read the sequel and the sequel. It's called the Southern Reach trilogy. Starts with Annihilation, and then Jeff Vandermeer, who is now pretty much the biggest weird fiction writer that we have. He wrote, it's all three in a row. The second one takes place and for those, I won't spoil it, but the word annihilation means something incredibly different in the books. That's a complete rewrite of her using the word annihilation before she turns into sparks. Annihilation is something very, very different that I'll tell you guys off mic if you want. But the Southern Reach
it'll be a real secret.
Is fascinating.
Fascinating. I got to get him on the list.
And with Annihilation, it's fusing animals. It's fusing things together, just like in Color Out of Space when Mom and Jack get fused together and that abomination. Yeah. There's a lot of connections.
I love in Annihilation the fact that when they go in there, you cannot trust what you know about nature. Here are these scientists, Natalie Portman in particular is a biologist. She knows about nature, animals, plant life, whatever, but none of it is doing anything like it's supposed to according to the science that we know on Earth. And I especially love the scene with the bear. The second time when they're tied up, you hear the one woman scream, and it turns out it's this mutated bear who can mimic the sound of his last screaming victim. Holy crap, that was amazing.
Yeah, that is it is a terrific science horror movie, right? Like it is the horror of science and horror. There's gruesome stuff in this movie. I absolutely loved it.
And to jump on what Ray was talking about, just about how they can't trust nature and they can't even trust any physiological. He's like, what did you only had the rations when she's being interrogate afterwards. She only had rations for like a week or something. You were in there
Yeah.
for months. She's like, I don't remember eating. Like
Yeah.
the unreliable narrator. What? Unreliable. Now I'm an unreliable speaker. An unreliable narrator is our only entrance, our vehicle into the movie, which is, of course, Lovecraftian totally.
Well, and that gets back to my question as I was overthinking the end of this movie, is that I don't think the movie ever gives us a sense that, because the movie already told us how the bodies switch, right? When the alien takes over and the at the end of the movie with Oscar Isaac, and it doesn't give us that with with Natalie Portman, and I struggled with how the movie interpreted that at the end. And then I feel like just through this conversation, I get the fact that the movie is leaning so hard into the rewiring factor, the genetic rewiring, the fusing, all of that maybe that's the part to just let go, right? Like that's the part to just let go. And does it play on that in the sequels of the books? Is that, do we get to understand better, or is that a spoiler?
More so? There's some changes.
Okay. All right.
It ends like the book ends with Natalie Portman's character going back into the Shimmer.
Okay.
To try to find something else. So it's different.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I thought it was fascinating. It's one of the high points on the list, in addition to The Lighthouse, which we've sort of talked about. The last one that we do have on the list is William Eubank's 2020. It's the most recent Lovecraftian adjacent underwater. And this one is Kristen Stewart, Vincent Cassel. What'd you think?
Love it.
Alien Under the Sea.
Yep.
But I loved it.
Yeah. I mean, I thought
it's tragically underwatched. Like it was a real big flop when it came out, and I don't know why.
I don't either. It feels like it's a movie that doesn't exist without Lovecraft. It doesn't exist without H.R. Geiger. It doesn't exist without like so many of the sort of legacy of tropes and design that have come out of the works of Lovecraft. They are all in this movie. They're all in this movie, and all the way to the final reveal of the creature, which is extraordinary. I'm with you. It is tragically underwatched.
And it's another one of those.
I'm wondering if it might be. Sorry, I was just going to say, I wonder if it might be Kristen Stewart's reputation after the Twilight movies as being kind of a stony actor.
Yeah.
Stony face.
That would make sense. Which is a shame because I think she's really good in this movie.
I think she's really good, and I think she's really talented. And isn't it interesting how the kinds of choices that she and fellow Twilight actor Robert Pattinson in this series are making, and the things that they've chosen to make, the movies they've chosen to make, Underwater and The Lighthouse are their example trajectory, right, of just making interesting movies that are hard to shoot, that are hard on the humans involved in making these stories. And I think they're fantastic.
I love the creature design in this movie. I love the evolution that you see. It starts out with the small creature, kind of like in Alien. You see the small creature, and then eventually you see the big alpha, which is obviously Cthulhu.
Yeah, right.
It ends up being a lot like Cloverfield, where ultimately you are introduced to an entire ecosystem of creatures that beget creatures that crawl on creatures. It's a lot like Cloverfield, The Mist. Those kind of that we are, because again of man's inability to not open underwater trenches and stick our things everywhere, that we are exposed to an entire ecosystem that we have no ability to understand.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
and that is an interesting thing because I don't know. Does Lovecraft write a lot of underwater stuff?
The Dunwich Horror, the things are coming from under the water.
Oh. That's a good point. That's a good point. I think it's just interesting that his cosmic horror includes the depths, right? It's really any dark places,
right? Unexplored
can hide
dark places,
unexplored, right? Horrors. Yeah, I think it's really interesting. So that's our set of movies. Any huge awakenings? Anything you watched here that you just loved that you hadn't seen, or had you seen pretty much everything on the list?
I personally had seen about half of the movies on the list. Two that stick out to me in particular was The Color Out of Space 2019, which I hadn't seen and I absolutely loved. But then In the Mouth of Madness, which I had seen, but was kind of lukewarm on. But when I rewatched it this time, it's like a whole new dawning of comprehension came over me, and I just absolutely fell in love with it. Again, I just love that you kind of feel like you're going insane with that character.
Tom, you got any high points?
Just, I think what we've already gone over is
Yeah.
the reorientation that I have for so many films and putting it more in a Lovecraftian. I think I was stuck in Lovecraftian just being old gods, but really it's the other and the incredible other that we are not prepared for whatsoever, that so many other movies, I don't think I would have called Lovecraftian. I think I even, Pete, when you started the thing, the Letterboxd, I questioned. I said, what is the thing doing on there?
Yeah.
And what is Prince of Darkness? That's the devil and that's an alien. But then, cosmic horror. I was stuck in a box probably because I read so much Lovecraft growing up and then forgot about it.
Yeah.
So no, this has been really eye-opening and I'm really glad that we did this.
I think it's really interesting to watch all these films all at once. And the part of it is because when you look at the choices that these filmmakers had to make to translate, and again, I'm not obviously a Lovecraft scholar in terms of his original writings, but I have been reading, and it is really dense. Like, it's super verbose stuff. It's not, they're not easy reads, and so it's easy to kind of nod off a little bit for me. And to be able to translate that prose to images on screen, I think is a heavy lift in some cases. And I think a lot of these movies do it very, very well. Even in the movies that I don't love, I think the choices they make are great. Like we talked about the Dunwich Horror, the filmmaking choices are fascinating. There are some like incredible like tracking shots and follow shots that demonstrate the location, the sets. Tom, you said the sets are beautiful. The Haunted Palace, same thing. Like they're really beautiful examples of filmmaking, and that's great choices based on some dense material. So
I love that. And just to, if I can bore you with a quick quote from the 2019 Color of Space, because what we're talking about is you're filming the unfilmable.
Yeah.
He never opens the door. And so, what do you do when the text says, what touched this place cannot be quantified nor understood by human science? It was just a color out of space, a messenger from realms whose existence stuns the brain and numbs us with the gulfs that it throws open before our frenzied eyes. Stuns, numbs, frenzied, none of that makes for a clear visual. And so you both have nothing to work off of and a complete open palette. And so it's really exciting to see what filmmakers do with that.
Yeah. I had a ball. Thank you guys for suffering through the length of the list over the last month.
No, thank you.
Been a huge treat. So that was my choice.
Definitely.
That was my choice. I did that.
You
Lovecraft.
did that. That was yours. You did it.
That was all new. And now, who's next?
Ray.
Well, I've been working on a little something that I like to call
Soft Shoe.
The Movie Lovers. I call it the Movie Lover's Guide to Lycanthropy.
We're gonna do werewolves?
Oh no.
Yes, sir. We're going to be taking a look at werewolf lore.
Love it.
Outstanding. It is. We've only done like 6 episodes of this show. It's about time we got to werewolves.
It's like anniversaries. The first anniversary is paper. The second episode is werewolves. The third is always Skinnamaring. Yeah. Okay.
Really fun. Can't wait for that. That's going to be coming up in October. Great time for it.
Perfect.
Super satisfying. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, everybody, for downloading and listening to this show. We appreciate you hanging out with us. And make sure you head over and check out the show notes. You can see the curriculum in Letterboxd. Links to all the films right there on our Letterboxd list. And I will start building, as soon as Ray gives it to me, I'll start building the Lycanthropy list in Letterboxd too. So check out the website over at True Story FM, and you can catch up with it there. Thank you, everybody. On behalf of Ray Delancey, Tommy Metz III, I'm Pete Wright. We'll see you next month, right here, sitting in the dark.